blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I am your host, Jason Sircone. We are coming at you live on this beautiful Wednesday evening. Tonight, we're going to take a deep dive into the post-production process of podcasting. In my opinion, a subject that doesn't get enough love, because once we produce these podcasts and put all of our effort into creating great content on the front end, what our listener gets to experience on the back end once we put the TLC into play is really what it's all about. I've always said the unwritten rule in podcasting is that it's all about listener experience, and making that happen comes from smooth post-production procedures. Now, of course, as we do here on this live stream series, I can't do it alone. I can't come to you with all of this great information just coming from my mouth. I need the help of friends. So to make that happen tonight, I am bringing to you the one and only Steve Stewart. What's up, Steve?
What's up? What that introduction, man? There's some post-production in that thing. Just in a 30-second teaser you got going on. That's crazy. Blow it up.
That's right. We got to set the tone right, and that's the intro that really has done just that, because the compliments have always been very high, and that's how we like to lead things off. We lead with strength. So, Steve, for Bomb Squad members out there that have never met Steve Stewart, he is the founder of Steve Stewart Podcast Productions. He is a fellow member of the Podcast Professionals Association with me. That is our season 3 sponsor. And I did my best to get as many PPA members here on the show as possible. So we'll talk about that later on in our conversation. But to get the ball rolling, we want to jump right into post-production. And talking about editing, Steve, I know in the short time that I've gotten to know you, this is something that you're very fond of, and you've built your career around this. So I want to talk about something I still see, and it blows my mind. It's folks that are rolling out podcasts without any post-production. And I've heard excuses like editing and removing some words makes it sound unnatural, and it drives me crazy. So on your end of things, what are some of the, I guess, misguided approaches that you've seen people take to post-production, and how are you doing your part to negate that in our podcast industry?
Well, you said that some people say that, it takes it out and it's unnatural. Well, if it's unnatural, it means that we're not doing a good job editing our content, or having somebody else edit the content, because the sign of a good editor is you'd never know that they were there. You never knew that it was edited. Good post-production is seamless.
Yeah.
And you just don't even know. I mean, you have a feeling. It's just like movies. A movie is produced by professionals, and unless there's a bad edit, you're never going to know that it was produced. It was just, that's what you expect.
Yeah.
So there's really a couple excuses, and there's a couple reasons why people don't edit. The reasons that people don't edit, which are justified, is I don't have the time or the skills, and I don't have the money to pay for it. I get that. Totally get that. And because the podcasting space is so easy to get into, because hosting your files on places are free in some cases, people are getting into it without jumping into it with both feet. They're thinking, excuse me, they're thinking I can do this. And then they realize, it's a lot more work than it should be.
Yeah.
Nothing you can do about that. It's just going to be difficult until you get used to it. So those are the excuses that actually are true. But the ones who say, well, it's unnatural, it's only because they're either editing poorly or they just are too lazy. And yes, I said lazy.
I'm with you 100% there. That's the word that I've always applied to it. If you can't remove that low-hanging fruit, like an that somebody does every other sentence that's just hanging there, you're not doing your job. And that just creates a lesser experience for the end user, which is our listener, our audience. In my case, the Bomb Squad. I want them to have the best experience possible when they consume this show. So I'm making sure that I'm being very meticulous about that, and maybe even more so than others, because again, I care about that audio quality. I want them to have the best experience. And that's why I've never been able to stomach that argument that I've had with people about removing those things because it's not natural now. No, it's just that you're lazy.
Yeah. For the people who are watching this, I just coughed over Jason. I apologize for that. It's just, I couldn't stop it. And then I muted myself and coughed again. So if you're listening to the replay, I don't know, Jason, will you edit that out, please? I don't know.
Well,
But that's
I guess to back up what I was saying about good audio quality, I'm forced to now, right?
yeah. But we just talked about it, so it becomes content. So maybe you leave the
Yeah.
cough in. And so that's the juggling act that we have when we're talking about editing. What content do we leave in? What content do we leave out? But I'm a firm believer that you take out mostly two things: noise, things that are getting in the way of a good listening experience, because we're trying to listen with earbuds. We're trying to listen in our cars. We're trying to listen while I used to listen while I mowed the lawn, and I could almost never get the headphones up loud enough.
Yeah.
And I don't have noise canceling headphones. I should probably invest in those, but you get the idea. There's noise all around us. So I want to be able to get a clear signal in my earbuds, my car, whatever, as much as I can. But then the other thing to edit out is content. Now, content is what we're here for. We're here for the story. We're here for the explanation. We're here for the information. Here for the entertainment. But what isn't content, and this is where it gets to be really difficult for editing, is like, and people are like saying like all the time because they like to say like, right? So kind of like that, and sort of kind of maybe all those iffy words that just iffy words dilute the power of a sentence. You really want to sort of kind of maybe.
Right.
Do I really want to, or do I sort of kind of maybe? It's confusing. Now I'm like, wait a minute, what am I? And then you lose track of the conversation because you're trying to figure out what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
So the content is what you're trying to make really shine on top of a good, clear signal that you've done in your post-production. And of course, capturing good audio is the first thing to do when you're doing that. But then if you've got, oh my gosh, here's a story. I probably shouldn't share this because I was trying to keep this to myself, but I got this recording from a client, and it was the worst audio I'd ever heard. I mean, I've gotten bad audio before because we live in a world with Zoom. And people think you can just hop onto a meeting without headphones.
Yeah.
And I won't complain if somebody doesn't have a microphone. I get it. Most people who are being interviewed don't, because they're not doing this more than once or twice. So I get that. But the headphones, anyway, worst audio I've ever heard. And I'm like, what's going on? Tried all the AI tools, tried RX, tried to do all these things to make it so it was listenable.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do it. So I'm like, oh, I got to figure out what's going on. So I went to the video recording because they had recorded video. And I realized there was no saving this audio. The guy was sitting in front of his laptop, no microphone. Okay, that's fine. No headphones. Okay, that's horrible because trust me, the audio gets mixed when two people are talking at the same time over the internet.
Yeah.
And the software just doesn't know what to do. So I call it going underwater. Two people are talking that goes, anyway, but that's not the worst part. The worst part was where he was. Because over his right shoulder was a men's urinal. I kid you not.
What?
Yes. So I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. Do I even bother trying to do this? Because we're not going to be able to fix this audio any better than it already is. But then I remembered the host went through with it, and the producer was there who set up the recording schedule and was there. They okayed the interview because the guy is kind of, we'll say he's known for something in his space. They wanted to capture that recording. But
obviously.
Yeah. It was just the worst audio I've ever, and I couldn't fix it with anything.
Yeah, I think this is a lesson, and this is a lesson that I learned very early in the game. When I was doing my first podcast, I had set up an interview with a gentleman, and when he signed on, we had set it up. This was really before the days of Zoom, and this is pre-COVID, so no Zoom. We were doing Skype and Ecamm at the time.
Back in the Skype days.
Yeah, right. I mean, it worked. We did our job, but he logged in from his car while he was driving.
Oh, while he's driving? Oh,
yeah. So no microphone, no headphones, in his car on the car speaker. And I looked at that and said, I could go one of two ways with this. I could get super mad and say, what are you doing? Why aren't you in a quiet environment? But I stopped myself and said, I never set the table for this. I never told him what I expect, because I never expected that. So lesson learned. Now I think it's on us as podcasters to set the table for what we need to capture the quality audio that we want for the end product. And that's not just for us. It's not saying like we have to be super stringent with this list. It's because we want you to sound your best too. You're not going to sound your best from a urinal or from a car that's in rush hour traffic. So it's up to us to set that expectation, and then hopefully, if they can get their hands on a microphone and headphones, that's going to make for an even better product.
Yeah, and that just proved that you can't always save the audio. You can't. I tried
Yeah.
5 different things. Couldn't do it.
So what did they do? What if since they redo it with that guy, or they just scrap the episode?
No, it's out. I think it's out now. So yeah, it's been
Oh,
published
so it went out as is,
as best as you could.
as best as
Now,
could. Oof, okay.
here's the thing. So in post-production, audio is king
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to audio podcasts. When it comes to video, audio is still king, but you can get away with a lot more because you
Okay.
have more than just the one sense that you're using to consume the content. You now have the lips. You can kind of read lips or
Mhm.
follow along. So you can see what's going on. And it's amazing. You think about when you go to a party and there's a lot of people there. You're in a group of 2, 3, 4, and you're talking to each other, but there's just noise everywhere. The band's loud, the DJ's loud, or whatever, or it's just a ton of people in the room.
Mhm.
Somehow you can still carry on a conversation with the person right in front of you. It's not because they're so close that you can only hear them and everybody else gets blocked out. It's because the brain can perceive what it's missing. It fills in the gaps with the words. We know sentence structure. The brain will fill it in so we can follow along. So with video, we have more to consume and more to figure out what's going on, and visuals too. What's going on here? What are they doing? What are they saying? If they're smiling and it's upbeat, that's a different energy. But then if they're just kind of talking about a sad story, they're slumping down and they're kind of getting quieter and stuff like that. It helps to convey the message in the video. But the problem there is you don't have the theater of the mind with the audio only type of product. But
Right.
yeah, with the video, they released it because there's video that goes along with it. And it's just, it makes it a little bit more consumable. But of course, they zoomed in so you couldn't see everything in the background because that would just be wrong.
Tip for the ones that are recording in the bathroom too, so you get the urinal out of the picture. Zoom in tighter.
Zoom in tighter.
No, I think don't do that. Don't
Mm-hmm.
do that. It's funny you say theater of the mind. I did an episode with Tracy DeForge today for our co-host collective series, and we were talking about audio still being obviously the most important component of podcasting, and the fact that if you do want to do a podcast without video, it's still doable in 2025, contrary to the opinions of many people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I champion video because I feel that as I work with businesses, they need those assets. That's why they're building a podcast. So video is an important component, but we're never downplaying the importance of audio. And Tracy used that exact terminology, theater of the mind. You can accomplish so much with audio just because you're putting a picture in somebody's mind based on the way you're telling those stories, and they have no visual to go on. They're listening in a passive environment versus whether it be in the car, on the anywhere on the road, at the gym, on a walk. There's the ability to let the mind build something magnificent from the words. I think that's something that we can never downplay. And that's why I feel audio is always going to remain a huge component of this, regardless of what iteration podcasting becomes next, because we know it's already evolved beyond its original inception and original definition.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel audio is going to be important, and it continues to require good post-production, because the way it is now, and this is the way I see it, you get one chance to make a good first impression, and someone tunes into a podcast where it sounds like shit, they're not sticking around, because there's going to be other podcasts that are going to be able to deliver the message that they're looking for, and they're not going to stand for background noise and too many flubs and dead air and all of these things that many podcasters unfortunately still put into the world. And I think the learning curve on that is getting flatter and flatter.
Yeah. What's amazing is that the tools out there to capture good audio and to fix audio have improved greatly over the past 10 years.
Indeed.
So that's why now I'm like, you want to start a podcast? Great. It's never been easier to start a show. It may be more difficult to get an audience, but on the audio side, it's, if you look at the growth curve of active shows in the past 5, 6, 7 years, except for 2020, it's been pretty much stagnant. It doesn't grow that much. You think over the years, more shows would grow. Now, the total number of shows have grown, but there's a lot of shows like my original show. I retired it in 2015. It's still counted as a podcast because it's still out there, but it's not active.
Right.
And it's always like in the 400,000 range. And we're only counting audio podcasts. I don't think we're counting video here, but it's 400,000. And that's worldwide. That's not just English. So think about that.
No, you're right.
So you can get in with some decent audio, just basic stuff. You don't even need a lot of money to get started. And then
Sorry.
the problem there is the talent. You got to have the skills to be able to convey a good story, to get good guests and have a good interview and things like that. That's, obviously very important.
Mhm.
But then if you're not, if you're just throwing your Zoom calls up on YouTube, that's not good. I forget where I was going with this explanation, but you could take it away.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the barrier to entry to get into podcasting is extremely low. It has been for a while. Now there are tools that I know when I started podcasting in 2015, I did not have the tools to help me make video clips and pull transcripts and create blog posts and show notes at the push of a button. But now with AI playing a major role in everything we do, it does simplify the process. There are certain things, just because of who I am, I like to do longhand, and I would rather use my own intuition on editing to edit the audio portion of a podcast versus letting a program remove all the filler words by saying remove all the filler words, because I still think this is something that I've done, and I'm sure, Steve, as you've gone through building experience and getting better at your craft, I like to move things around now.
Yeah.
I like to listen to what I hear and say, ooh, this would sound better if I move it here. Or if it's an interview and somebody has a reaction, maybe that reaction would be better moved back here so it doesn't run into the person's next line of thinking. I like to do that, and I don't think I could ever program an AI bot to do that, or an AI software to do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm old school in that respect. I'd still rather sit down, and for me, it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's what people say, like, I can't believe you still do this all yourself. I'm like, yeah, I do, because I have a blast doing it. That's why I started a podcast.
I would bet you money that AI will be able to do that in the future, because it just keeps improving, and and it's improving on itself. It's not like we were sitting there with a keyboard and maybe coding it all in. I think AI has learned; it's going to learn on its own. We're going to have that Skynet someday. It's going to happen. Let's enjoy the ride while we can. We have it. Using AI is one of those tools that we editors and podcasters need to learn. And we were talking a lot about podcasting topics there, Jason. We're getting off topic. We want to talk about the post-production side.
Yes, right.
And we're talking about how podcasters can do all of this themselves. But, why would they want to? Why would they want to spend all this time getting those 10,000 hours in to be experts at editing?
Yeah.
When they really should be focusing on the content and getting the guests and stuff like that. So I do believe when you have somebody who's serious about the craft, they're serious about their show, and they want it to be a success. I mean, it doesn't take them much to do it themselves other than time. If they have the time, great. That's how I did it. I did my show all myself for years, for 5 years. But man, it's so nice when you can just outsource some of that pain and get your life back and be able to focus on what you're good at. And it's just like when somebody's talking about a business, a small business specifically, what's your first hire? The first hire is going to be an accountant or a bookkeeper. Probably a bookkeeper. Because if you're baking the cupcakes or you're repairing the vehicles or whatever, you're not a bookkeeper. You don't want to do the books. You want to outsource that thing so you can spend more time on your craft, getting new clients, being a salesperson for your own business or whatever. Yeah. That's usually the first hire. So when it comes to podcasting, the first thing I always think to outsource is one of the three: editing, a producer role, which is going to be someone who's going to help you kind of craft the show, figure out where it should go, find the guests, stuff like that. Or a podcast manager who kind of manages a lot of different things, not just the editing, but maybe they do social media and outreach and stuff like that.
Right.
That's usually that's the best hire somebody can have if they're looking to be serious about their podcast.
I can say that as I've had more conversations since launching Bombtrack Media, talking with business owners, that's the one thing they don't want to do. And it's the back end work. And I completely get it. And that was why I built my business model the way I did, because I knew that time was a factor. And most business owners coming into this, they don't necessarily even have the time to sit down and do a consistent weekly podcast, which is why we look at seasons first to see if that's a better outlet. But sitting down and doing that back end editing and putting the show together, that's a whole new skill set. And that's the more time consuming part of it. They don't want to do that. And I don't blame them. So I recommend to anybody, if you're looking to do podcasting, understand if you're doing everything yourself, you are learning at least 3 skill sets to do this, from hosting, producing, or post-producing, and then marketing. But if you bring in somebody that can help alleviate some of that and just give you some of your time back so you can focus your energy where it's best used, which in most cases it's having the powerful conversations, making the good connections. That's going to lead to a better end product, because once you create good content and have better conversations, your editors, your post-production people are going to be able to make a better product, and that's how you'll grow, because that's going to be what gains traction over time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Better product keeps people listening longer too.
100%. Let's stick to that for a minute, because I know for a fact there are still a lot of podcasters that use Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I was very guilty of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew coming out of my other podcasts that I needed to make that change. Why do you feel we're still leaning into Zoom? And why shouldn't we, as podcasters, be using Zoom to build this product?
We're talking about podcasting. This isn't post-production. But I'll tell you why you shouldn't use Zoom.
Believe me,
I'll answer your question.
I'm getting to where we're going here.
The reason we're using Zoom is because A, it's easy for everybody, and B, we were taught in 2020 how to use Zoom. We were forced to learn how to use Zoom. I mean, I was using Zoom for years before 2020, but people who had never been on a video call before were now forced to use it, and they had to learn how to use it. And it's simple. And there's a lot of people who don't want to deal with the tech. I totally get that. Yeah. Zoom is fantastic for almost everything, except there's two things. I used to think there was only one. Now there's two. Let's go with number one. The audio is recorded at 32K when everything else does 44.1 or 48K, which means there's more information. It sounds better. And a lot of people say, well, I don't hear the difference. I'm not an audio snob, believe it or not. You think I would be, because I'm sitting here with speakers and listening to every little noise. But when I'm listening to a Zoom recording, the audio from it, I get ear fatigue. After about 15 or 20 minutes, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, what? And I thought it was a health issue. I was like, why am I feeling so tired all the time now? And then I realized once people started using Riverside and Squadcast and Clean Feed and these other recording situations that are a lot better, I wasn't getting tired. I'm like, okay, common denominator, Zoom. That's what it is. So that's number one. Number two is if you're going to do video, I don't know why, but I've got clients who cannot figure out how to get their cameras to be 1080p. So they're recording in 720, which means it's low definition.
Yeah.
And it doesn't split the video track. So you can't do an easy camera switch. It's just static. And when you've got a widescreen next to a widescreen in a widescreen frame, there's a ton of black bar space on the top and bottom, which makes the video so much more boring. And we don't want boring when it comes to video.
Right. Yeah. And I only asked that question because, again, I think all of this lends to creating that better end product. And when we get into post-production, I still feel that when we are using the low grade technology, and I don't want to knock Zoom because that's not my intention. I just feel that for podcasters, it's not for podcasting. It's for conferencing. Yeah. StreamYard and Riverside and Squadcast. These are for podcasters. These are the products that we should be investing in because this is going to help us make that better end product. So that's how I'm segueing into the rest of our conversation being about post-production.
Good.
So, Steve, I want to know a little bit about what brought you into this and what made you start focusing on this so seriously. What brought you into the world of production in podcasting?
This is a really boring story. It's not like
well, liven it up, my friend.
It's not the hero's journey or anything. I was involved with the community. I was a creator. I was podcasting about personal finance topics. And I was going to a conference where other finance nerds were hanging out and talking about how they create content. It was mostly bloggers. So I was one of the few podcasters in the group. So they thought, oh, there's Steve. He's a blogger with a podcast. And my blog actually won an award. And it was really the show notes for the podcast. That's how, mostly it was based on blogging. So I was in this community and I was always like, hey guys, this is thing called podcasting. It's been out for several years. You guys have these websites, you have this great content. Why don't you put your face and your voice on your blog and stuff like that? I was always encouraging people to start. Well, in 2015, I went to one of these conferences and there was two famous bloggers who had been talking for months about getting together and doing a show. And they knew I was always being helpful. And I heard about this and I said, hey, if you guys need some help, let me know. I'd love to help you figure out what to do. They called me up and they said, here's what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the call, like, Steve, we just want to hit record. You know how to edit and stuff. Would you do the rest?
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I can help you get launched and I could edit, but it's not something I do for free. They're like, absolutely. So 2 well-named bloggers launch a podcast in January 2016 because they're well known, big email lists. The thing explodes. Other people in that community of bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers heard that I was editing for them. And they're like, oh, well, we don't like the editing. So let's call Steve. And so by June of 2016, just about 6 months, it became a full-time job. It was so fast and crazy that I couldn't believe it. And this is how I know there's a God. I had already left my day job like a year before to focus on my own financial coaching business. My podcast was to support my financial coaching business. That's what I thought I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I had the free time now to work as, this little side hustle of editing. And I was already involved with this community and it just all worked out. That's why it's a boring story. It just worked out.
No struggle along the way. It all fell into place.
Well, there was bumps in the road.
Okay.
There was some friction in the relationship with my wife because when you're down to because it took 3 years to get back to what I was earning with a salary job.
Sure, I get that.
But that third year, I also surpassed it. So it's kind of like, woo, big win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it took a couple years to get that right, and you learn a lot when you're running your own business, self-employed. Where was I going with this? 2016 became full time. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I didn't realize that I love it so much until I was doing it for other people. And when you walk into a room and suddenly you realize that you know something more than another person, they see you as the expert. You're like, oh, well, I could be helpful here.
Yeah.
That was me already in that FinCon community, the conference I was going to. And now that was me in a smaller niche for that community on the post-production side of a podcast. And these are people who are obviously they're going to pay somebody else to edit their show. They're serious about their craft. They're serious about their art. They're serious about their show. Mm-hmm. So they were going to pay to have somebody else take that pain of the post-production away from them. And that's how it turned into a career. And I always also, I also like to root for the underdog. I like to cheer them on. I like to see them win. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of the movies too. You see the underdog win. I love those. Well, podcast post-production, the editing, that's like the underdog in podcasting. Because if you think about all the things you see and hear, it's all about how to grow an audience, how to monetize. Yeah, everybody's doing that. In fact, there are so many people I know who start a podcast and then other people ask them how to start a podcast. What are their credentials? They did it themselves. What if they're doing it wrong? What if they're not doing it the best way? Mm-hmm. How could they be experts if they've been doing it for less than a year? They know more than the other person. So I felt the post-production side, nobody's talking about that. In fact, in 2017, I went onto Facebook and I'm looking for a group who talked about editing, and there were none. It was all, nothing wrong with these groups. I'm members of them, Podcast Movement Community, Podfest, the Podcaster Support Group, all these great groups. Mm-hmm. But rarely was there a discussion about post-production. I'm like, I want this group. Okay, nobody else is doing it. I'll create it myself.
There you go.
We're almost at 9,400 members now since 2017. And I'm not really marketing it or anything. It's just, it's there for people who want to join. And all we do, the rules say, all we do is talk about post-production and how we serve our clients. So there's this side of podcasting that nobody seemed to be talking about. Nobody seemed to be focused on.
Yeah.
I wanted it. I created it. And now we've got that community.
And I think what we've learned, I mean, you and I met in the Podcast Professionals Association, and you had mentioned many of the great Facebook groups that exist. There's so much power in that community because this is where we come together and we have these conversations. Sometimes the conversations can go a little bit off the rails, but for the most part, everybody is there to help. Everybody is there to provide guidance. And like you said, I may be one step ahead of you, but that's just enough to help you get to where I'm at. So instead of getting yourself in this mindset of, well, I'm way back here and they're way over here and I'm never going to catch up. No, like we all want to help each other move forward. So if I'm on level 6 and you're on level 2, let's talk about how I got to level 6 and I'm going to get you there. And having a Facebook group or any type of community like that, it's only going to make the process so much easier because you never know who's reading, who's watching, who you're going to get a chance to connect with. And once you start building those relationships, you're going to learn tactics and strategies and things that you probably never even thought about. And it's going to take your skill set to a whole new level.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was about 3 months after I started that group that somebody's in the group and they said, why didn't I know about Isotope RX before today? And they did hashtag sorcery, because our Isotope RX is a tool with all these different features in it. De-esser, de-noise, breath control, mouth clicks. Oh my gosh, that's my favorite tool. And I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, what's this RX thing? And they had to explain it to me. I'm like, okay, now I have to spend $1,000 because I mean, it was that much of a magical tool. And that, I'll tell you, RX is they may not be on the AI side of development. Maybe they're about to be, but I still use it every day for every single piece of audio that comes in.
Yeah,
because it just makes things sound better.
Well, let's talk a bit about the sound. And you mentioned the mouth clicks.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain sounds, that probably being the one that's at the top of my list, that I will never, ever, ever, ever let exist in a podcast that I edit. If there's a mouth click that is coming out, if I think I heard one and maybe let it pass, I'm like, no, wait, I got to go back and make sure I missed that. I don't know if it's kind of become a complex in my editing tactics, but it's little things like that. I think it's those little subtleties that set apart the editors that are really putting the major TLC into things, and the ones that are just letting certain things skate, like, that's fine, they'll never notice that survived or that mouth click survived. So what are some of your non-negotiables on things that you have to remove from your podcast when you edit them?
As far as the audio engineering, every piece of audio I get, spoken word audio, it's going to get that mouth declick run through it. And that takes care of a lot of this that goes on in the background. It's just, I mean, it's ASMR. And if you're sensitive to that stuff, and I think maybe I am, maybe you are too, or maybe it's just annoying to everybody, but that's got to go. DS. So if somebody's speaking with a lot of S's and there's, oh man, I mean, that hurts after a while. That's probably one of the reasons why I get fatigued with Zoom, is the S's for some reason just seem a little more pronounced there. And then de-reverb, if there's a lot of reverb in the room, that's helpful to dampen or remove completely. One thing I found is a lot of the AI tools do a good job on that as well. But if you've got RX, I mean, it's $1,000 program if you want the good one. So that's a big investment. Although the one that's here, let's talk about RX. Why don't we?
Yeah, please do.
A lot of people, when they start with editing and they want to have some kind of a tool for the audio, and they hear about RX and they go for RX, they start with the small one, the Elements one, and you get a couple basic tools there. But that's where I was like, oh my gosh, this thing's magical. Here's more money. Because you have these other tools. If mouth declick is this good, I want the other stuff too. So you can go up to, I think it was a $500, $600 plan called Standard. That's all you need once you get there. You don't need anything more than that, unless you want these other really advanced tools like dialogue de-reverb, not just de-reverb, but dialogue de-reverb, or there's like a de-wind. And I could be wrong. Sometimes they start to include these advanced features from older models into the standard of newer. De-hum is really good. What are the other ones? I'm looking at the thing right. De-rustle. When you got somebody who's got their headphone, their microphone is on their earbud. They're still wired and it's rubbing against their shirt or something like that.
Yeah.
That's helpful. De-click. I use that on some people who have a bit more vocal fry than others. That seems to help there. There's, of course, it comes with EQ, loudness, leveling, stuff like that. It's very important to have your volume level too.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than having some person's really quiet and the other person's really loud. And what's interesting is that you'll have somebody who's speaking. They could be speaking loudly, but their voice is still very soft. And then you get somebody who's not talking very loudly, but because they have this voice that's a little, I don't want to call it rough or harsh, but it's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? I should know this word. But anyway, it's a little more,
coarse.
How about that?
Projectile. Yeah,
it's coarse. And they may not be speaking very loud, but it sounds louder. So you have to somehow account for both of those. Because if one person sounds like a whisper and the other one sounds like they're shouting and they're speaking normally, that's a problem. Because you have people listening in their cars with their earbuds, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the leveling is probably the one thing that everybody needs to figure out first.
I will say that's a lesson I learned the hard way, because in my amateur days when I was just figuring this thing out, I did a podcast recording, and when I edited it, I did not understand the whole concept of leveling. I was still very new, just trying to figure it out, and I did what I thought was was enough to make it passable. And someone left a review saying, I can't listen to this podcast when there's a guest that sounds way louder than the host. And that was the ultimate smack in the face. I was like, man, my guest sounds better than me. So
I'm guilty of the same thing.
Yeah.
Episode number 3 that I did, I had an interview with somebody else. They were very boring, which was sad.
Yeah.
I could not get them, to come in. And I also had a problem with the background noise, because this is 2010. Okay. So we're not expecting great audio back then. We're accepting okay audio.
Right.
And there was a lot of, I had to go back. I have not gone back to my old episodes and remastered them or anything, but that one I had to go back to. I'm like, this just, even if nobody's going to listen to this, I just know I can't leave that out there. So
yeah, I hear you there. That's my first podcasts are gone, and it's so irrelevant to what I do now that the only way that I could really do it is I had accidentally come across an old thumb drive I was looking for a document for my accountant, and I found an old thumb drive with my old podcast. And I said, I could do a look how far I've come live stream series where I play some clips from that podcast, just to say, here's how I've learned how to be a better editor, how I've learned to be a better host, have better conversations. There was a lot of things that when I went and listened to it, I was just like, my God, is this cringeworthy? I was so bad at this. But I give myself some grace in saying that we all have to start somewhere.
Yep.
We all have to learn how to do all of these things. And as we get better at it, then the product shows that. So I'm okay now.
Yeah. If you think about the podcasters that started in 2005, they were coding their RSS feed. There was and there was hardly any media hosts out there that they knew about. That has completely changed.
Yep.
And we were using Skype to record interviews over the internet. Yeah. We have come so far from there to have now services that record locally and then upload to their servers. So we're capturing what is right here and now. I mean, you and I could have this conversation on a phone and not be using the internet to communicate, but capturing our audio locally, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And then just put it together later, and it's going to be a much better recording quality than Skype that we had. Because, if the internet started getting wonky, it was, that whole thing.
Yeah. And again, I think of the standards that weren't in place. You said 2010. I don't think we had enough tangible data to say this is what it should sound like.
Right. Yeah.
I think a lot of what we were trying to do would parallel radio, but you know what it's like with radio. Sometimes you get static, you get dead air, it wasn't a perfect medium either. So if we were trying to mimic that, I think we were saying, okay, well, we can screw a few things up and people are still going to listen. And it was probably what happened. I wasn't podcasting that early in the game, but I have to believe that perfection was not something anybody was trying to obtain, simply because there was no model to say, here's what you should at least aspire to, if not get close to.
And the bar has been raised. So
yeah,
there's no excuse for that Skype audio anymore. And editing that Skype audio when it got choppy, you cut out the gaps in between and bring it together, and you might have to cut a little bit more because the way that the signal came through, it was jumbled. And boy, I'll tell you, it felt like a win getting that word together after it went like that. But then you're like, I just spent 2 minutes on this one word. So is it really a win?
Yeah, and again, if the listener experience is better, I guess it could be chalked up as a win. But I understand that, you're devoting a lot of time to just making one little part sound good. But you know what? To speak to that, I still find myself doing that sometimes. I'll play with a sentence. If there's another word that I can move around, it's just what I do. But I look at editing from my side of things when I've got clients that are either sending me files or I'm actually sitting with them and producing the show, and then I'll do the editing after the fact. I get to hear this first.
Yeah.
I get to experience this conversation before anybody else, or I get the solos. I have a couple clients with their solo shows light me up. There are coaches that are really putting a ton of effort into creating content that excites their audience and attracts them and shows them what they could do to help them grow. I get to hear that first. So in my mind, I take it so seriously that I have to make them sound the best they possibly can. And they're doing a great job on the front end already. But in the back end, I'm going to make some magic happen where I'll move a few things around, just make things flow a little bit better. And that's a passion to me. And
Yep.
I know that my name is attached to this, even if it's ghost format. But that's how that's a lot. I think any editor that hears this message, that's the pride you should be putting in the work you're doing, whether it's your own show or somebody else's. Think of it as the most important piece of audio that you've ever touched.
It helps when you really like the content too.
Indeed.
I was a follower,
Indeed.
listener, subscriber to the Stacking Benjamin show since day one, because they actually had a show before that they retired and started a new one. So I could actually say I listened to episode 1, from the start. And then a couple of years later, I got to actually be their editor. And it was only a couple of years after that, I'm like, you know what? I've heard more Stacking Benjamins than anybody, because now I've got the 90-minute recording and all they hear is the 60 minutes. And I get all the outtakes. I get all the, take that out, Steve, all those things. And so the Stacking Benjamin show is, normally it's 2 co-hosts, but sometimes there's 3, who's the announcer guy. The third guy's the announcer guy. And he might be on with them too when they're recording what they call a rapper, which is the main content of the show. It's not just a guest. And one of the co-hosts, OG, he thinks his job is to make Joe laugh so hard that he, spits milk out his nose.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that is you get really blue, and it's stuff that you cannot air. So I get to laugh and have fun. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, why can't I share this with anybody? Because it's so funny, but it's really bad.
Yeah. That's always my favorite when I get the message. Hey, it's like, there's like this 3-second pause. Hey, okay, I'm going to redo that part. And just, because I'll be listening to it like, wait a minute, this is slowly derailing. What are we going to do? And then they catch themselves, and that's always good. So we got a question from Mr. Michael LeBlanc. What's up, Michael? Opus Clip. Have you used Opus?
Yes, I've used Opus Clip. I've used Minvo. There was something else I used as well. Opus Clip and Minvo are very similar. At least they were.
I use Minvo. Yep.
Yeah. It is where you bring in your video and you let the AI determine what they think the best clips are going to be. And it could give you like 20 clips for a 30-minute recording. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll do a vertical. So it'll put the 2 people up and down, top and bottom. It'll put the captions on there. I think now they even put some AI in there where it cleans up the audio.
Yep.
So that's nice. I haven't done that yet. But I'll tell you what, it's so hard to use sometimes because you've got to get the parameters of the clip where you want them. If they didn't decide what you wanted. And and sometimes the best clip isn't selected. My clients tell me that all the time. So I love Opus Clip. I love Minvo, but I've actually been here's some, my clients now are telling me they don't like those clips. They want me to do these clips, and they'll tell me which clips they are. When they tell me what clips they are, I'm putting the video into the script and making them manually.
Yeah, I think if you get the timestamps, that's an easy process. I mean, you're talking to somebody that used to do it longhand, just like anybody else. We would go through and find, okay, from 103 to 207, this is the perfect clip. And what I've learned with Minvo, it's just like any other editing software. You just have to get good at using the platform and using that transcript to block off, like, this is where I want it to start, this is where I want it to end. It's not always a clean cutaway, but it serves the purpose and makes, again, being able to plug in the full video and get back 20 to 30 clips, a transcript, a blog post, list of suggestions. And there's a chat feature, which I've tried to use it twice in Minvo, and this is just a PSA to them. Every time I try to use it, it says, sorry, this isn't working. So maybe it's just me. I'm not dissing them at all. I'm just saying, like, I've tried to use it and it didn't work, but everything else has worked for me just fine. And the time that I've been able to save just by giving it a couple prompts, and then I have to massage it just like any other AI tool.
Right.
But once you get that product, that's time saving is unbelievable. That's the one big thing about AI. But yeah.
If you don't know what you want, that's a great way to go with these AI tools. Absolutely.
Agreed.
But with most of my clients, they're coming back saying, let's get this, let's get that, let's use these clips. And because I know what I want, and because the script just makes it so easy to create. I mean, and they really do look beautiful. Mm-hmm. I think they look more beautiful than these AI tools. So when I have a new client come on board, and they want the social clips, I give them two options. I say you can have several AI generated shorts, or 3 that you determine what you want. And I'll tell you, all but one has come back. They start with the, I get several for the same price as 3. Okay, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll spend an hour on the 7. You know what I mean? Because you got
Yeah.
the upload time, you got the rendering time, you got to wait for them to come down, all that stuff. They've all but one has come back and said, "Why don't we do this over here? I want this clip." So I use the script anyway.
Yeah, that's, I think, something to keep in mind for everybody there, especially on the AI side. There is a new tool popping up every day.
Every day.
It seems like that's an exaggeration. I don't think it is. I'm hearing about a new tool every day. It's crazy. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, you could get fatigued trying to, okay, I want to bring this into my world and see what it does. You got to say, okay, what are my most important needs? And okay, this tool will fill that need. I'm going to do that. Minvo was perfect for me because it satisfied many, I don't call them issues, but things that I was looking to accomplish, made life a little bit easier. So Michael's continuing the conversation. I'm looking for intelligence in my tools and to speed up production. Of course, a human will likely be better, but will they be cheaper or as fast?
That's
Good
the key.
question.
That's the key. Cheaper and as fast? Absolutely, AI is faster.
Yeah.
Because the computer brain is going to work a lot faster than we are.
Yeah.
And so you kind of sacrifice some quality, but then again, what we're doing in this world is we're creating, we're editing podcasts for clients. We're getting the clips and stuff for our clients. They're putting something out usually every week. You don't have time to make a masterpiece. You don't. So shipped is better than perfect. Yeah. Isn't that what Seth Godin says? So I completely agree with Michael. I mean, that's why I still use Opus, or now I'm using Minvo, because it will generate a lot of great clips for me. But then, again, it comes on time, how much time you're spending on it. Are you satisfied with the results? Is it going to produce the results that you want, which is engagement with an audience?
Yeah. And it's important to understand that no matter what AI tool you're using, you have to have the human element involved. You can't just let it do all the work for you because it's just not there yet. And I'd like to think that in a human world that never will be fully there, where it doesn't need us to do a little massaging to make it the way it should be or the way we want it to be. But it's absolutely something that can save time. And it can cut, again, try to think about, I did an hour episode that I loaded into Minvo and got like 39 clips back.
Yep. Do you have time to go through all those?
39. Well, I combed through and found the best ones based off of just reading the script, and I can use this. This will be perfect. But I'm just thinking, to sit down and manually do that, that's a full day, if not longer, to piece together everything and pull it out and clip it and do the effects and whatnot. Yeah, AI could be your friend. And I think ChatGPT, same thing. I use that for blogs and show notes, but I am putting in prompts that are probably, like, when I'm done, they're about this big, because I'm putting in what I don't want it to say. I'm putting in keywords. I'm putting in, this is what the show title is. This is what we talked about. I want this, I'm very specific with my prompts, and therefore I get a good product that I can use. And it's SEO friendly at the end of the day, which is really what it's all about. I want my podcast, I want clients' podcasts to get discovered. So I don't just let it say, like, give me a 6 bullet points and 3 paragraphs about my podcast and just let it spit out a pile of shit. It's got to be very specific. And I think that you can, I know Minvo offers that. You can put in a prompt and say, I want this, this, and this, and that's what it's going to search for. So yeah, it can be a very trusted ally in this process for sure.
Yep. Time savings too. That's the biggest thing. Let's just, like Michael said, time savings. And the podcaster themselves can use a lot of these tools. I've lost clients. I hear about a lot of people in my community who are losing clients because the AI tools are there and they're actually pretty simple to learn. I mean, click a button, it does this. There's still a value to the service that we provide.
100%.
Yeah. So it's not like we're losing our jobs to AI, but then we use AI in our processes because we need to get efficient and better at what we're doing as well.
Yeah.
And, I'm always, what's funny is I know a couple of professional audio engineers. These are people who have, the college degree, the experience in the studio with musicians. They've gone through all this stuff. And we talked to them about their podcast. Like, yeah, I'm still dialing in my voice. I still don't like the way it is. I think I could do better. After years, I'm like, okay, you're still learning how to do it better. And the tools weren't all that much different.
Yeah.
And fortunately now we have these, and I said, and fortunately, not unfortunately, and fortunately. So get the AI right to do the transcript. And fortunately, we have these AI tools to make it easier for everybody. And I know that's going to take away from the audio engineer who's got the skills to do that. Like I talked about the one that I could not fix with the bad audio, but there's a lot of tools that I can use that do make the audio better. And it saves me a lot of time, which means I can then provide my clients a better service. Faster, on time is very important because sometimes they're the ones that cause the delay. They record on a Tuesday for an episode coming out Friday. How am I supposed to get this done in that time when I've got 20 other clients to deal with?
Right.
So that's AI is something that we also need to learn to use, but then we've got to make sure that it's working properly. You mentioned way at the beginning of this call, not using AI to automatically take out the filler words. I do use that feature sometimes because if I know that my client has a cadence of always ending their sentence with right, right, all I have to do is type in the search right question mark RIGHT question mark.
Yeah.
It's going to find all those, and almost every single one of those is a crutch word that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Remove, fill with gap, and then if I go through it, I'm like, I really need to leave it there. I can go back to the original. I can undo it. I can do whatever to put it back so that my client still sounds natural.
And that's what it's all about. Again, I've said it many times in our conversation here. It's all about the listener experience and making your client, making the talent on the show sound like a rock star, sound as good as possible. That's the beauty of what we do on the back end of this.
Yep.
So a couple of last things I want to talk about before we wind this down, Steve.
Aww.
I know, right? We could go all night, but
we could. We're talking about editing. We could go all night long. Me and Michael. Come on, Michael. More questions.
We've got a lot of people, more than likely, either whether they're watching live, whether they are listening to the podcast version of our conversation, that are probably still going to want to do this themselves. Now, I know both of us would probably recommend, if you don't want to bring on that heavy of a lift, you find an editor like myself, like Steve's, and somebody that can help you do this easier. But for those that are dead set on doing it themselves, how do you recommend they develop this skill set? What kind of tools should they get into their repertoire? And ultimately, what should they be aware of if they want to run with this themselves?
Just doing it for themselves, not as a service to others.
Exactly. Doing their own, doing everything for their show DIY. Correct.
First of all, they got to think about what are the platforms. No, where is my audience going to consume this product? There's primarily 3 places. One is a podcast app, a true podcast app. 2 is YouTube or Spotify with video. And the 3rd is on a website, which is usually just the media player from a podcast, audio podcast, or it's the video embedded from YouTube or Spotify. So now we've defined, we're doing video as well, aren't we? And so now we've got to talk about tools that we can do to produce video. I'm going to go back to Descript because I just think Descript has got a lot of magic built into it. It's very affordable for what it does. And the learning curve, well, I can't say that because they keep upgrading and changing the thing. You're always learning. You got to relearn the tool every couple of months. Something changed just recently. I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm lost. And now you get to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes researching the support pages to figure out.
Always moving the goalpost.
Where'd the publish button go? It's gone. It's now export. So there's always learning that you're going to have to spend time on that. But then if you really want to just get good at editing video, you've got Adobe Premiere, you've got DaVinci Resolve is cross-platform and free. It's powerful. So you'd have to be learning the program. And that's where, again, I go back to, does a podcaster really need to be spending their time learning the tool, or do they need to be working on their craft? Yeah. So that's where I'd start with that. But then the other side, and you mentioned this earlier, there's 3 ways to go. You got to be the host, you got to be the post producer, and you got to be the marketer. The marketer, that's another big time suck, is marketing the show. And I'm not just talking about blasting everything on social media. Hey, listen to my show. Hey, listen to my show. Listen. Everybody does that. It's nothing new. It's annoying to people. How can you actually get in front of the audience that you're trying to reach? What is your niche? What is your specialty? What is that person who really wants your show? Who are they? Where are they hanging out? That's where you want to be. That's how I got my job. Was I was hanging out with the people that I was like them. I'm still one of them, even though all I do is post-production. I'm still going to the conference. I'm still going to meet all the creators in this personal finance niche.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I still get clients from that. I just had a client today, or a client, I should say, an old friend from way back at a previous conference emailed me today, said, "Hey, we're thinking about restarting our show. We're looking for somebody. Can you help us find one?" Normally what that means is they're going to create this online application, and I'm going to share it with my Podcast Editor Academy members, because they're the ones who are looking to make this a profession. They're doing this serious. It's not just a guy who thinks he can edit for somebody because he does his own show, which was me back in the day. But then I'm like, you know what? This is my type of show. This is the show I want in my repertoire. So I actually did apply for that and shared it with my group as well. Yeah. So I've been where they are. I know what they want. I'm one of them. And that's what any podcaster needs to do. They figure out where their listeners are going to consume their show, where they're hanging out, so they can get their show in front of those people. And you need to figure out the YouTube algorithm if you're going to put your stuff on YouTube. That's a new thing I've never talked about before when it comes to marketing. Yeah. Because the YouTube platform is such a different beast than all the others.
I agree.
It's because the search in podcast apps still sucks. It's still bad. Mm-hmm. But YouTube is owned by Google, who has mastered search. Right. So yes, of course, if you want discovery, use YouTube as a social platform. And it's free. Hello. I mean, that's why everybody's putting their stuff on YouTube. We've been putting our podcasts on YouTube for over a decade. I was putting mine on. My first video from my show was 2014. So yes, more than a decade ago. I was doing that. I'm partly to fault there for people on YouTube for podcasts. Is YouTube a podcast platform? No, it's where people consume podcasts, but it's not a podcast platform.
Yeah.
Just like my website with a media player is not a podcast platform. It's my website where people can consume a podcast. Yeah. I don't know why I'm going in that direction. People have so many arguments about YouTube and podcasting. And
that's a whole episode in and of itself.
Yep. And I'm a seesaw on that. It's like, yes, you're right. But then there's, I'm devil's advocate there. So they've got to be good marketers and be promoters and figure out how that game on YouTube is played if they want to make it successful on YouTube. But I think they don't need to do that part. Yeah. They just need to get in front of their audience where they are.
Yeah.
And let the organic growth go from there.
And from an editing perspective, if people are looking to take that on themselves, I highly encourage them to join your group, which I have not done yet. I need to do this as well. So how does that work? I know. How do we get into Steve's group?
There's two ways to get to the Podcast Editors Club Facebook group. Go to podcasteditors.club. That URL will take you right to the club in Facebook, or just search for Podcast Editors in Facebook, and it'll take you right there. It's the only one that has over 1,000 members, so you can easily find it. And it is strictly just post-production conversations, or how to serve our clients. And it's my favorite place on the internet. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like Facebook, but then I have people in that Facebook group who says, I don't go to Facebook except for this group.
Well, that's a big endorsement there.
Yeah.
That says a lot. That's awesome. Well, consider me a new member, and Bomb Squad members, if you're looking to do editing on your own, jump into the group, even if you're passing editing off to somebody else, which again, I think was really one of the big themes of our conversation tonight. If you're a business owner, if you're strapped for time as it is, but you want to leverage podcasting, trying to learn the skill of editing at the same time can be a little difficult. And I'll go right back to the very beginning of my days. I didn't know what editing even meant. So we just threw out whatever piece of crap that we produced. And that showed. And I remember finally about 6 episodes in, I was like, I think we better probably start talking to somebody. And I talked to a buddy who was doing podcasting, and he showed me some tricks so I could start making things sound a little better. And that was really what got it started for me. And I just improved the skill set from there. But it took time. That took time.
Can I enhance to something you said? If you're a podcaster and you don't know how to do this yourself, you might actually consider joining the Podcast Editor Academy.
Okay. Yes.
Because we have tutorials on all the largest editing programs, video and audio. Now the site is really geared to help people learn how to do this as a business. But if you're really learning how to do podcasting post-production better, we've got we've got all that taken care of. It's all in the
Excellent.
Podcast Editor Academy, which is at podcasteditoracademy.com.
All
Ding!
right.
Thanks for letting me do that pitch.
No, I appreciate that. We're going to put all the links in the show notes as always, so it's easy for the Bomb Squad to access all the good stuff you've shared tonight, Steve. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight and dropping all this great wisdom. Hopefully our people can walk away at least knowing there are resources out there so they can edit like a pro.
Hey, Kidden, it's my pleasure to talk about editing with somebody else, not just my wife.
Well, if you want to keep the conversation going once we end here, I'm sure you can go and sit down and say, man, I got all the juices flowing. Can we talk about X, Y, and Z? Let's keep this party going.
You heard it all. She helps me to figure out what I'm going to talk about when it's comes to the YouTube podcast debate.
Right on. Well, Bomb Squad, thank you so much for taking in this episode. Michael, thanks for the questions to keep the conversation stimulating this evening. We'll be back again next week on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn with Mr. Charlie Krebs. Charlie is a client of mine. Charlie is the host of the Soft Skills Strong Results podcast, all about interpersonal communication and soft skills. We're going to dig into that for podcasting and why the best podcasts are born from good conversational skills. So that's an episode you do not want to miss. So make sure, if you haven't done so already, that you click the bell on YouTube. That way you know when we're going live and when any other new content drops as well. And you can always visit bombtrackmedia.com/live to get connected to your favorite platform to consume each live stream. So on that note, Steve and I are going to sign off for this evening. Thank you very much for being here. And until our paths cross again, Bomb Squad, this is Jason Sircone on Let's Blow This Up, reminding you to stay explosive. We'll see you next week.